let's dive in. We'll be punctual since I know it's very busy school day for our wonderful principals who are joining us. And I'll just start by thanking them so much for taking the time in the middle of the day to be here. My name is Aubrey Uhas. I'm an education reporter for New Orleans Public Radio. And during this webinar, we're going to hear from three principals on three issues that schools across the country are tackling right now and have been tackling for the last couple of years: cell phones, discipline, and chronic absenteeism. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. A reminder that this webinar is on the record and is also being recorded. If you have questions for our speakers, please type them into the Q&A box. Be sure to include your name and affiliation, and feel free to ask your questions at any time, and we'll get to them at the end during the Q&A portion. Now, let me introduce today's speakers. We have James Ulrich. He's a principal of Argyle Magnet Middle School for Digital Design and Development in Silver Spring, Maryland. The school has used restorative justice practices to address student misbehavior for nearly a decade. Shauna Haney is principal of Ogden High School in Utah, which has had a cell phone ban in place since 2024. And Dr. Damon Lewis is principal of Ponus Ridge STEAM Academy, a middle school in Norwalk, Connecticut. Its chronic absenteeism rate fell from 31% to 8%. Wow. That really caught my attention. I'm really excited to hear how you guys accomplished that. We're going to turn to student discipline first. So since the pandemic, we've continued to hear from teachers and school leaders that student behavior, isn't what it was before schools closed, that they're dealing with new challenges. James, we're going to go to you first. Can you tell us, what you've seen at your school and how your staff is continuing to use restorative justice practices to help your students?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for this opportunity just to engage in this really important conversation on these really important topics. So I've been at Argyle for now 11 years. So I really have a sense of, kind of pre-COVID, pre-closing and post-closing. And when I first got to Argyle, one of the first things that just jumped out at me was the number of referrals, the number of students that were being sent to the office. It took me probably about a good 2 years to really get a handle of all on it. But what I quickly realized was that this was not about the students and the referrals. It was about the lack of relationships that our teachers had with our students, the lack of connection that they were making or had made with our students. And to be honest, I had two teachers who came to me and said, hey, we really want to try this kind of restorative practice. At the time, it was something that was new to me. And I kind of pushed back against it because I just didn't know much about it and, things that I'd heard about it. And then they came back after that second year saying, hey, we really need to try this based on this data. And we went ahead and we started talking more about what would this look like? What would be some of the anchor points and how would we actually do it? And at that point, not only did I fall in love, but our entire community just really embraced and saw the impact of it. After that second year of looking at all these, about 1,000 referrals for 1,000 kids, we went down about 50%. We saw 500. The year after that, we went down to about 250 or so, and we've been kind of leveled out since then around that time. What we saw is that when we came back from the COVID, we started to see a spike again around that particular space. Again, connection, getting to know our community. And when we came back from COVID, we really doubled down in some spaces. One of those particular spaces was around advisory, where we were very specific about what is it we wanted to see in that space. And that was really around community circles, where we did lots of community building. So that way, when students experienced the harm or experienced a situation where we needed to come into a restorative conversation, they actually had something to restore back to. We thought that was really, really, really important. So although I hear, and particularly from my experience and many others' experiences, people adopting restorative practice because of discipline issues, it really anchors our community. It really anchors how we engage, and it really, really helps our school culture and climate. So we often have students coming to myself, to my restorative justice coordinator, to counselors, to teachers saying, hey, I would like to have a restorative conversation with this student. Sometimes it's with this teacher. We also do restorative conversations teacher to teacher. I've had teachers who've had restorative conversations with me. have asked for those. So it's really a tool that we use to be able to not just communicate and solve conflict, but really to build culture and climate.
That's great. I'm curious when you maybe have conversations with parents about what restorative justice is. Like, how do you very simply explain it to them, and like the guiding principle to this?
Yeah. So I try my best to explain it to them from this perspective around community building. That if you were to think about an issue that, when a parent may have an issue with their own child, oftentimes you don't want to throw the child away. What you want to do is figure out, how do we make this a learning lesson? How do we help them repair the harm that they've caused? But it's also teaching them for them to identify what harm they caused so they don't do it again. So we really take it from a really learning perspective. Some of our parents, even after those explanations, still push back. So oftentimes what convinces the parents is just the proof when the actual situation happened and they actually watch the magic, right? And it's not really magic, but it's when they watch the community that have been built, how students come together to not just apologize, to make sure that they don't find themselves in that situation again. You really see it when parents start to tell you that, hey, my child asked for a restorative conversation at home. And then you really start to see those things. So the real convincing of parents is really about when it comes to life. But in the beginning, we do have a bit of a challenge to share it with parents, but we do the things, right? Coffees with the principal where we have those conversations, PTSA meetings, back to school night. We spend a lot of time talking about how we do this work and why we do this work. And then, we've seen it. And when we explain that to parents, they tend to get on board.
Yeah. I want to open it up now to our other two principals and ask you if you guys have felt any pressure to use suspensions or expulsions more, in the last year or so, just because of some of the conversations that we've sometimes seen at the state level. We've heard our president, Donald Trump, talk about the need for schools to be tougher on discipline. Are you all feeling any pressure, or has it been easy enough to stay the course, with restorative justice and other things that you've been relying on in recent years more heavily?
It again, to echo Mr. Ulrich's sentiments, thank you for having us on this engaging conversation and these topics that are really impacting schools, not just in our district, but schools nationwide. So thank you, EWA, for putting this together. In terms of feeling any pressure, I always say pressure's a privilege. I use that term quite frequently with my staff, and I don't feel any pressure from the state or the district. We use PBIS as a way to incentivize behaviors in our school. We also have restorative practices as well. So to answer your question, Aubrey, no pressure. I always use suspension as a last resort. It's an absolute last resort. Anytime I feel that a student needs to be out of the learning environment for a day or so, and it's never more than a day, depending on the action, we do take those steps. But 99% of the time, we do have those restorative conversations. We use PBIS as a reward system and as a disciplinary system second. And it's really, really important to note that it's used as a reward system initially. And then we have minor and major infractions within that realm as well. I think it's really, really important what Mr. Ulrich talked about relationships and engagement. And one thing that we do in our building, we have one of our acronyms is RBC, it's relationships before content. So, we're going to get to grade level standards and teach those things that are in alignment with those standards and rigorous tasks. But it's imperative that our teachers build those relationships with our students and our families, so we don't have to get to that point where we're at suspending someone. And we've seen a huge drop in our numbers, similarly to Mr. Ulrich in his building, just because we have PBIS and our staff is open to having those courageous conversations. Teacher to teacher, teacher to admin, student to student as well.
Just for folks who are not familiar with PBIS, can you very briefly describe
Sure.
that is?
Sure, I'm sorry. PBIS is an acronym for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. And it's a way that we incentivize the behaviors in our building. Our building that I that I work at is 90% students of color, 75% free and reduced lunch. So we really, really work hard on setting expectations for students and staff around the verbiage of PBIS, what our expectations are, and the routines that we establish in our school building.
Thank you. Shauna, anything you'd like to add on this?
Just to echo what they said, thanks for having us here. And I was writing down some notes from Mr. Ulrich's what he was saying. I would love to learn about community circles. I don't know much about that, but to echo what Damon said, we run a PBIS system and it is school-wide. Ours, it revolves around what we call triple OT, on time, on task, on track. And we are the Tigers, and so kids earn Tiger points. And just barely, I was down in the cafeteria with lunch, and one of the students said, "You ought to give us fast passes. We could earn fast passes for Tiger points." And I was like, that is a great idea, and it's a free idea. And so I just called my PBIS coordinator and said, "Hey, let's get fast passes on there. We're gonna, charge 20 points." But I think that's the big thing is school-wide. I mean, we hope that at least 85% of our kids are helped by our PBIS system, which Damon kind of explained. And we want to be really, really clear with expectations. We feel like, and people say that all the time, clear is kind. So the PBIS system, I think, is our anchor. And then I loved the relationships before content from Damon. And again, I would love to hear about community circles, but our school is somewhat like Damon said, we revolve around those principles. And I have not felt any pressure to suspend students.
That's great to hear. And I'll just say it's great to be talking to a bunch of principals. I think, there's probably people who have an outdated view of principals as like this disciplinarian, like what we see in like movies and televisions, like you send the kids to the principal's office. And I think what you guys are describing is really the true real role of the principal in building culture, supporting teachers and students, and really making sure everyone's on the same page so that you have this really rich learning community. I'm going to move us on to cell phones now. So 35 states had policies or laws limiting cell phones in schools as of October, and many of those bans started this school year. So relatively new thing for a lot of people. But Shauna, your high school was one of the first in Utah to ban cell phones. Can you tell me about, how you reached that decision and what the ban entails exactly? Because I know schools are kind of doing lots of different things from, putting phones in pouches or locking up phones or relying on students. So give us the full picture where you're at.
Well, my teachers were tired of battling them. And quite honestly, I was tired of watching kids just on their phones instead of engaging with each other. And so ours really came from, one of our goals was active learning a couple of years ago. And we found that our scores, we felt like they could be higher when we went into classrooms to do observations. And so with wanting more engagement and active learning from students, our teachers helped us come up with what we thought would work for our students and our stakeholders. And it would be easy to put them in a pouch and have them locked up all day. And I'm definitely not like dissing on that. Like that's great. We wanted more. We wanted our students to be able to, okay, I have a cell phone. How can I be responsible with it? And it has to be out of sight and in my backpack during class time. Now, in transition, they can have it, and at lunch, they can have it. My teachers also didn't want a battle. And that's half the problem when you're trying to build a relationship with a student and then you're constantly disciplining, that becomes a battle. And so we set it up so really it's not a battle for my teachers. And we put that out in a way that said, hey, we're all supporting this. And we put it out to the community as well. We put it out there for weeks before we put the policy into place, and we practiced with students what it was going to look like. My teachers don't have to battle with students. They simply can walk up and hand them a device reminder. They'll just put it on their desk, basically. So they're not having a confrontation, and then they can continue to teach. So if a teacher saw a phone, they put a device reminder on the desk. Then they'll chat our admin team, and one of us will go pick up the phone. And it might not be that period, it might be another period. Either way, it also has opened up so many conversations with our admin and students and parents, because every time we pick up a cell phone, we call home, we speak to parents. I think the surprising thing, I think some people thought parents were going to be angry. Parents actually, in the beginning, some of them were a little bit, I don't know, upset. On the second time a student has a phone, we ask that parents come and pick up the phone, and they do. We really haven't had any complaints. In fact, more than anything, I've had parents say, hey, thank you for doing this. I get less phone calls and texts from my child when they're at school. And I'm hoping that they're actually focused on the learning that's going on. And so we are seeing higher scores in active learning with our engagement in the classroom. Teachers don't have to battle with students. It does take time from our admin team, and we have to be very planned out in order to follow through with this. And that's the one thing we felt strongly about, is following through, because we found that most students, if they get it one time, they're not going to get a second time. And if they do, we have plans in place. So that was the reason we did it. And then it just helped. We were doing it. And then the governor came out and said, hey, I'd really like us to not do this. And now it's most states. So.
Yeah, I love the reminder card. It almost feels like a referee, and then, like you said, not putting that on the teacher to have to be the one to really enforce. Now that it's been in a place for a while, like how many cell phones are you guys picking up a day? Has it really dropped off?
Like honestly, today there hasn't been one cell phone. And so, but some days there's more than others, right? It depends. But I have to say, our district was going through accreditation a couple weeks ago. And that is the one thing that a couple of the people that came through, and they were out in our school all day. They said during class, they said, I did not see one single cell phone. And sometimes sitting at the back of the class, you'll see kids that get them out and try and hide them. But they actually said, I did not see one single cell phone. So
very impressive. And what have you, I mean, we talked about parents. Have you heard from students in terms of, how they feel about the policy at this point?
I think they just understand it now. They know that it's good for them. They probably still don't like it because kids like to scroll, right? That's another thing that I think has helped, is less problems in our bathroom areas during class. So when a kid takes a hall pass, they have to put their phone into a cell phone locker in order to take the hall pass to go. That's been really helpful, so that kids aren't meeting up and texting each other and trying to meet at certain times. So I think it's helped with discipline. I think it's helped with a lot of different areas in our school.
And like with that note on like the bathrooms and the phones, did you have this whole policy worked out when you started, or did you make tweaks as you were going? It just sounds very comprehensive.
We added in the hall pass, kids turning in the hall pass when they went, because we found that if kids had it in their pocket and it was hidden, that might be something they were doing. We added that in last year, but honestly, we worked through this and had a number of meetings with my faculty where they just had question and answer documents that they could put in, and we came up with an FAQ. So honestly, I think we worked it out so much before we ever rolled it out that I think that is what really helped us be successful. And we had involved our community council and our parents. And so I feel like that kind of set us up for success.
Yeah, you guys put all the hard work in on the front end. I want to open this up to the rest of our principals. Damon or James, how are you handling cell phones?
You want to go first, James?
You got it.
Okay. Similarly to Shauna, at the middle school level, we've had a cell phone policy in place this is my 15th year in the building, 11th as the principal. And our cell phone policy has always been, as soon as you come into the building, your cell phone goes in your locker. That's it. It goes into your locker. If you are, I hate to use the word caught, if you have your cell phone on your person, it's taken for the day. It goes to a grade level leader, and the grade level leader gives it back at the end of the day. If it's caught a second time on the person, it goes to the main office, and the parent has to pick it up. So when people come into our building, there's two things that they're really shocked that one, our building has no bells. I have no bells in our school. And the second thing is no cell phones, because kids and families know it's been drawn out clear that cell phones are a distraction to the learning environment, and we need you locked in, excuse the slang, for 6.5 hours while you're here, and the cell phone is going to be a deterrent to your learning. So it's in the locker, and that's it. It's really cut and dry.
Yeah. We had a very different journey from both Shauna or Damon. We were of the opinion for quite some time that, kids using cell phones was something that wasn't going away. And we needed to teach students how to use their phones responsibly. We're a tech magnet. So we were actually teaching kids, and still do, teach them how to use or develop apps. We just thought it was just flying in the face of what we believe around, responsible use, to say, don't use it at all. So really up until 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, we allowed students to use the cell phone in our building, but not necessarily in class unless the teacher said it was okay. Last year, our district started to move in this direction where we're saying, hey, no cell phones in the halls, but we still allowed them to use it in the cafeteria. This year, we have a full-out ban all the way up to 8th grade, right? And to be honest with you, I was definitely on the side of, hey, we have to teach them how to use this responsibly. And what I saw very, very clearly over and over again, that I was proven wrong, that particularly when you get to middle school, there's just so much happening with the being hijacked, the Magdilla, just all the things that's happening for a kid to be able to manage that themselves. So what I found, particularly this year with our cell phone ban, is that we're not having as many issues with kids fighting using their cell phones and saying, hey, now it's going to be posted somewhere. We're not dealing with as many issues with students going back and forth on some type of cell phone chat. Now, I suspect they're still doing it. And maybe they're just not telling us about it like they used to, but we just don't see it. Last year, we were literally collecting. This is when we just went to cell phones in the lunchroom during lunchtime only. We were collecting about 15 cell phones a day. So before I got on this call, I said I wanted to get that information. So as you asked that question, Aubrey, I was just like, that's exactly the information I pulled. So we're down to anywhere between 3 to 6 a day now. When I say cell phones, I'm actually talking about any digital devices, right? We're talking headphones, cell phones. Kids have long hair. We do. If kids have a hoodie on, sometimes they try to hide. So we'll take any and all of those items. But it also saves us quite a bit of time. Anytime someone has a cell phone in the classroom, we have a system where a teacher puts it into a Google form that automatically responds to the main office, and then we come and get it. When you think about that happening 6 additional times or even 12 times in a given day, that adult who has to now go and pick up that phone and the amount of time they're spending, that time can be used totally differently. And we're using that time differently now. So I'm sold. I'm totally sold on the cell phone ban. And if you had talked to me 2 years ago, I would have had a totally different conversation and totally different perspective.
Yeah, I think this topic's a really interesting one because it has been an evolution for schools. And I think to what you were saying, like, it does make sense that we want students to be leveraging technology, but I think we all know as adults, like, self-control with the phone is really hard, and to expect kids and teenagers to always make the best decision in a school setting is just maybe a little bit too much all the time. We're going to turn to our final topic. I'm going to have Dr. Lewis kick us off, and this is chronic absenteeism. So we know that we had a spike that really held after the pandemic, has started to come down in some places, but some parts of the country are still, really struggling with this. RAND found nearly 11 million students were chronically absent last year. Damon, Dr. Lewis, your middle school at one point had a chronic absenteeism rate, like we said before, more than 30%. And you brought that down by a ton, and this can be really difficult work. How did you do it?
Threats. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. You know what? We took We took a really, really hard stance about chronic absenteeism because we all know as educators that if kids aren't in the building, they can't access. If they can't access, then opportunities are limited. So we were at 30% in one year. And then, I'm sitting in my office one evening and I said, you know what, we've really, really got to do something. And we've talked about it, but we've really got to do something about it. So our kids, when they first come to the building, they go to homeroom. So the mandate was, and the directive is, if a kid is absent 2 consecutive days, that student and family gets an email from that homeroom teacher. Okay, and it's an email that comes from a place of support. It's not reprimanding. It's, hey, I've missed you. We've had a project the last couple of days. You're going to be behind. Hope everything's okay. From that, we formed an attendance team. So we have an attendance team that meets bi-weekly, and it's headed by our assistant principal and our 3 school counselors and our dean of students. If that student, shows up at the attendance team, if that name is still brought up, then we send home a couple of letters, right? There's a first draft letter, then there's a second draft letter. And then if it really gets out of hand, we are not shy. We've done it before and we'll continue to do. We just get up, we make home visits. We literally go to the home with the counselor and an administrator and find out what's going on. And we looked at, why kids weren't coming to school. And, in leadership, you always put the mirror up to yourself first and you look at you're really reflective. And, I looked at our course offerings and the things we were offering after school for our kids. And we had some, but we didn't have enough. So in about a year and a half's time, with using our budget really deliberately and intentionally, we offered more attractive course offerings around STEAM technology, coding and Lego robotics and computer science, and that drew kids in. We also have something that we started pre-pandemic, something I started called Walkthrough Wednesdays, where the first Wednesday of every month, we open up our school doors for anyone that wants to come in through a walking, talking tour. And that got some of our current families in. It attracted some of our elementary feeder school families in. And I always tell people, if you want to either change the narrative of your school or accelerate the narrative of your school, you have to tell your own story. You have to get people into the building in real time when the kids are there. So they see the transition, so they see the makeup of the school, so they see, what that coding class looks like, what that Lego robotics class looks like. So besides the home visits, offering more courses, we beefed up our after school clubs, right? They're all 90% of them are STEAM aligned. So we're looking at that huge drop in chronic absenteeism. We all know anytime you land below 10%, you're doing really, really good. That's almost considered great, right? 10% chronically absent. Coupled with that, having an assistant principal who has a camera in his office and he looks at the camera for the first 45 minutes of the day after the kids come in to make sure kids are checked off that may have come in tardy or what have you. So it was really deliberate, really intentional. It was a lot of work. I send home an end of week updates or beginning of week updates every week, and every single week I'm talking about attendance. Every single week I hammer it home. The parents love it. Coupled with, again, the offerings that we've created, the after school clubs we've created, the walkthrough Wednesday, seeing our building in real time. We've made our building much more attractive to families and kids, and it's really, really helped decrease our chronic absenteeism. We were down to May of last year, we got down to 7.7 around those lines. And we're a school of 650 kids, right? Grades 6 through 8. So it's an intentional effort. It's a deliberate effort. But if you have, everyone all in and you're meeting consistently and you're really staying consistent to what you say you're going to do, this is the day for the first letter. This is the day for the second letter. If we have to get an outside agency involved for counseling in the home or what have you, we take those steps, but the families know that it's not out of detriment, that it's out of support, and that what we have to offer in our building is only going to help your son or daughter thrive in the future.
I'm glad you brought up, the things you did to make sure that the school experience that you're offering is one that is appealing and people are excited to come to school, because I think that's such a big part of this. And it's something that you can do that is, not the same as getting the court system involved, right? Let's make sure that families, let's figure out why we're not going to school. And I think that's a great example. James and Shauna, can you just briefly, one at a time, give me a sense of like the journey with chronic absenteeism in recent years and how you guys are doing today?
You got it.
I can go. I definitely think it has been somewhat challenging after COVID. I think that when we went to, hey, I can do this online and I can just submit my assignments in Canvas or whatever you're using. Even parents sometimes would say, well, they're just doing their work online. And I would tell them, no, we're in school, right? We're an in-person high school. So that has been challenging. I think that part is getting better. I do like having a hybrid model, and I do think that works for some kids with some online and some in school. We are set up similar to what Damon had said, and we have an attendance meeting, and we have really worked to make sure that the wording in our letters, and it's kind of what Damon said when we sent home, that it's not punitive, but instead it's like, we miss your child and we really feel like they need to be here to be successful. What can we do basically to help? Same thing, we meet, we have a child assistance team, and then an attendance team kind of like comes off of that. And so when it's just about attendance, like finding out the why behind why they're not attending, and then trying to help the family put those pieces together and support them, and so that the students can be here. We're a high school, so we do have a lot of classes and a lot of opportunities after school. So that's not really it. It's more about, I think, finding out what's keeping them from school.
Yeah, I'll just add, very similar to both, both other principals. We definitely have what we call student well-being team, which we actually spend a lot of time with chronic absenteeism, identifying students. I'm very, very fortunate to work in a district that is also focused on this. So we have several tools. Like I can go straight to a dashboard, click on a button, and I can see the exact kids, how many days they've been chronically absent, if they're at that mark, things of that nature. What we know is that once they become, chronically absent, like for the entire year, it's hard to change that, right? Because it's anything over, 10%. So for us, we've also leaned into the spaces, we all know that, when we're looking at the work around building culture and climate in your school, it's also about making sure kids want to be there. Right. So when Shauna, you're asking about like the community circles that we do, we leverage that to find out what is it that kids want. What is it that we can do? What is it that we're not doing to make sure that our teachers are engaging our students in the most appropriate way? So when I think about the work that we've done, for example, around restorative justice and chronic absenteeism, they really overlap, right? Because for us, it is about building a community that students want to wake up and say, I can't wait to go to school. I can't wait to show up because I can't wait to go to that specific class. And that is a journey we literally are taking every year, because you have different students, different experiences, and different connections. So just trying to find what that connection is. And we see that as a large part on the adults in the building. That is our responsibility. Now, again, similar to Dr. Lewis, we do have a pretty robust after school program that's called Excel Beyond the Bell. That is something that our district manages and supports our school with. So we have, everything from tech programs, because we already a kind of a tech-based, a tech magnet middle school, all the way to crocheting, right? Because we also have kids who are like, hey, we've been doing tech all day. We want to do something totally different. So we really, really lean into the space of what are we creating in this space so our students actually want to come to school.
You got to my next question, which was the idea of how interconnected these things all that we've been talking
Yes.
about. before I take us in, our next direction, I'll just give a minute if Shauna or Dr. Lewis have anything to add on the interconnectedness of these three topics.
I think they have to be, right? And I think the big thing is in schools, do we have processes set up, and are we intentional about our time? Because one of them mentioned like how time consuming all of this is. I think the better laid out our processes are, the better that this all functions together.
Just to add and/or echo, I'm really, really big on systems and structures and leveraging things that are already in place. So you don't find yourself doing double work, or you're asking one person to do the same job, right? So the interconnectedness between all three, I think, relies heavily on the systems and structures that you have in place that support cell phone policies, chronic absenteeism, right? And the things that we're talking about today. I mean, it's really important to have people in place to leverage those systems and structures. And we saw that that drop in absenteeism due to the systems and structures that kids were somewhat getting away from, but then we were much more intentional and deliberate about, making them front facing and student facing, right? So that attractiveness has led to the drop in our chronic absenteeism.
I'll just add in terms of the interconnectedness, I can't say enough about the importance of just outstanding and strong principles. And it seems like you have, three that's on this call, but leadership is really, really important in these spaces to make this interconnectedness work, and to be able to provide the vision and the clarity for your staff and your community on why these things are important. So it's not just about hearts and the minds of our students. It's about our staff, and it's definitely about our community as well. So leadership, I think is really, really important here.
Yeah, and I think you all have made very clear how important the role of the principal is, and how lucky your schools are to have you all in your roles for a significant amount of time. Schools that have frequent turnover of principals, it's obviously much harder to get systems like this up and running and to maintain them. Before we go to the audience Q&A, I want to give each of you a chance to kind of speak to the reporters on the call and either, suggest to them an underreported, story, topic, issue you would like to see reporters digging in more, or, if there's like a misconception that you feel like reporters keep bringing up on these topics or on education reporting in general that you'd like to, correct the record on, like, please set us straight. And if you can, let's keep them to 1 to 2 minutes each, so we have time for the Q&A. How about we start with Dr. Lewis, if you're ready.
I'm ready. If there's one topic, now if I just have to pick one, I'll pick one. It's more studies and more reports on the influx of Latinx families in our MLL populations in our schools, and providing the appropriate grade level tasks and scaffolds and entry points for kids that don't have English as a first language, right? To have entry point to grade level standards, right, in the classroom. So it's to focus on the MLL population.
Great.
And MLL, for everyone, is multilingual learners.
Yes, thank you for that.
Shauna, you want to go?
Yes, I'll go.
Okay.
I'm not, Damon, you stole mine. We have a very high population of MLL students, and we do have an amazing setup that is called our newcomer program. And I feel like we're one of the only in the state that runs a newcomer program, and it is amazing, but I still would love more information on just tried and true strategies to help all of my classroom teachers feel more successful when it comes to my students that are learning English as a second language. Another thing, maybe just more feel good stories on teachers, honestly, because I feel like I have the best teachers and staff. And I think sometimes we don't write about that. And like, I would love to just write about more of the amazing people that are in the trenches doing the job every day.
Sean, I was gonna say second best to my staff. So yes, I mean the feel good stuff I think is really, really, really important. You know, when an issue happens and you get media who just converges on to a particular story that's just only negative, it's just a challenge. So I mean that's probably the issue other places as well. One of the topics I've seen a little bit more reporting on this is just the reduction in enrollment that's happening right now. 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we we're about at 1,000. Right now, we're about 850 students. My entire district, there's been a decrease in enrollment, and we do think it has a lot to do with what's happening in DC. So, be interested to see what that trend is going to, you know, how that's going to eventually kind of play out. We've had a reduction in the number of ML students. And I'm talking probably just the students who are coming new to the country. We usually get a lot more than, you know, we usually get a lot more around this time, and generally around January or so, we usually see a lot more. Last year, we didn't see as many as we saw in the previous year. And I'd be interested to see what happens this year. So I suspect this is not a new topic, but one that I know as a school principal, I'm looking to learn more about and try to figure out how do we continue to support our students who are either just not coming into the building and not even enrolling. And then obviously there may just be some people who would have traditionally have come to the country deciding not to come. So.
Right. And to that point, you know, trying to figure out which one it is, right? Are they at all, or are they not going to school? Obviously.
Exactly.
That's a big question to answer. Well, thank you. I think that brings us to our audience Q&A portion.
Yes.
Maura?
Thank you, Aubrey. Hi, everybody. I'm Maura Turcott with EWA. We've got some questions from the audience for our speakers. First, we have Joe, an education reporter for the Springfield Daily Citizen in Missouri. He asked, regarding PBIS systems, how new are these systems to your districts, and how long have they taken to get rolling where everyone is on board?
Well, PBI, we use PBIS rewards in our school in Norwalk, Connecticut. It's a platform that you purchase. And there is some training that's associated with it. It takes maybe the training is maybe over a couple days, but you have to continue to expose staff and students to it, and families and community members to get the certain verbiage that you use, right? You're reframing sentences, you're reframing words, so it's always aligned to the positive, right? Things along those lines. So it does take some time, but the investment is well worth it.
And we've been doing it since I got to the school that I'm at. Our district is district-wide PBIS. It does take time, and again, and Damon's talked about it too, your systems and your processes, your procedures have to be really aligned and well thought out. The two districts that surround us have not done any PBIS, and they've come to our school over the last couple of years to learn about it because they are trying to start implementing that into their school district.
We've done some PBIS work. Obviously, a lot of our work is around restorative justice practices, and to lean a little bit into this question around, you know, the practices and how long it is taking. One of the things I think, Aubrey, you brought up is just the amount of tenure that all three of us have in our buildings, and that really does make a difference. Right. So for me, in terms of like the restorative practices work, just one, finding just the anchor that is a day-to-day practice. So when we took on advisory, we had an anchor. And then from there, we were able to just kind of really just grow the program and through our practices. I would say it took probably a solid 3 years where you can actually see, okay, this is what we're all doing, we all embrace. And then there's this process that you go through every year when someone new comes into the building, and you have to you have to teach them, you know, what we've been doing for a long time. And then sometimes we forget, like we're like, oh yeah, this is what we do, and they're like, no, this person hasn't been here. So I'm sure both Sean and Damon have had these exact, challenges and opportunities to really just kind of help and grow as we hire new people. And as we do that, we also think about the mindsets, right? If you're going to get somebody who's going to, with the mindset that's going to embrace PBIS, or in this particular case, restorative practices, that is something we consider in our hiring practice as well.
Great. I have a question for you, James, specifically from Alina of Edweek. She asked, would you have considered a cell phone ban had the district not moved in that direction?
So my teachers were considering it with or without me. So yes, they've been talking about it. I was the one pushing back because I really felt like, hey, we have to teach them how to be responsible youth. So yes, I think that was that was the next move. We had reduced it all the way to just using it during lunchtime. So I think that was going to end up being the next move. But I think you heard it from Dr. Lewis, you heard it from Shauna, you're hearing it from me, and that is, we're not an island as principals in our building. And even when restorative justice came on board, it was something that was really pushed from the teachers in our building, the staff in our building. So part of, this leadership work is about listening. It's about, getting a good temperature gauge of what's happening, and then being able to do that work to actually, not just support the staff, but make sure that the students are getting what they need. So again, I've been very, very fortunate with the outstanding staff who've been pushing me and saying, hey, we need to do this. And I do think cell phone ban was next on the list, but the county beat us to it.
I have a question now for Damon, Dr. Lewis. Wayne asks, walk me through what a home visit looks like. Who goes from your team? What have you been finding? How easy has it been to solve these issues?
You know what? Thank you for the question, Wayne. It's typically the grade level counselor, whatever grade the student is in, and someone from our administrative team, either myself, an assistant principal, or a dean of students. So we usually go out in tandem, and we simply, get in one of our cars, drive to the house. Sometimes it's arranged, sometimes it's just a pop up, but it's coming to the house, and I sometimes we'll bring a third person, maybe the homeroom teacher, because I really like for our staff to see where our kids are coming from at times. I'm really, really big on our staff being culturally competent. So when we go to the house, you see where the kid is at, and you sit down, almost have a Q&A with them, like, why haven't you been coming to school? And if we have a food pantry in our building, we bring food if the families need it. So it's an all hands on deck effort. And what it looks like is a conversation for about 30 or 45 minutes. We ask the questions about why. We bring a copy of the attendance. We bring a copy of the report card. We identify the classes that they're doing well in. We also bring a copy of all the after school clubs that we offer. And a lot of times we get the kid to come to school with us right then and there, because we've talked them into it. We've talked the grandmother or the mother or the aunt or the dad into saying, you've got to be in school. And in the few attempts that doesn't work, we have had to call outside agencies. We have to get them involved. And anytime we contact the outside agencies, it's not, again, as a negative thing. It's a family that really needs some support, whether it's in-home counseling, whether it's some more secure shelter, whatever means that we have to take to make sure families get what they need. We make sure we cross that bridge.
I just want to add Wayne Dorio, who asked that question. He added in another comment that he actually went to PONUS, he says, 1,000,000 years ago.
Wow.
So just wanted to share that. So we have a question from Charlotte Alden, an education reporter at Cascadia Daily in Northwest Washington. She asks, how would you recommend reporters ask about / pursue stories on undocumented students and the impacts of this administration on them? Obviously a very sensitive topic, but a really important one now. From the perspective of a principal, what kinds of stories on this do you all feel need to be told, and how can reporters sensitively tell these stories?
That's a really tough one, only because it is, there's a lot of fear out there, and not everybody's willing to communicate and tell you what's happening, because they're not sure what you're gonna do with the information. They're not sure if they trust you enough. So if we're talking about students who are not in our building, it is really, really difficult, right? But if we're talking about students who are in our building, for us, it's about establishing that trust and then that connection. Then how do we get, reporters to get that information? Oftentimes that's gonna have to come through us. And that's has its own difficulty just with all of the parameters that we have to make sure that we honor, in terms of privacy and things of that nature. So I don't have a direct answer for you. I know it's something that's difficult. I know it's something that's needed. Um, I know there's a few other organizations out here that's attempting to do some of this work about supporting, our undocumented families, and they might be an avenue. And they have come into the buildings and they have partnerships with our districts, or at least with my district anyway. That might be a particular avenue. Shauna?
Last year, our newcomer teacher, which is our teachers, right? Any of our students that come in from out of country, they're in our school. And we had this unique situation where they were able to go to our local university, which is Weber State University, and they worked with them on a podcast on like what their life was like in Ogden, and what it was like before. And so I think that was a unique perspective to hear our students' point of view. And I hope that some of that work continues. But I think like them being able to be involved in a podcast like at the university level, where the university was helping, like they were the liaisons through that. I think that was really good, like a good experience for our kids.
I think it is a very tough question, but speaking with James and Shauna, we're veterans in our roles and our positions, and the trust factor is there. I believe our families trust. They know we're going to do what's in the best interest of them. One thing that I do in our building, the first Wednesday of every month, we have Latinx family meetings. So the first Wednesday of every month, we invite all of our Hispanic and Latinx families and students into our building, and we bring speakers into our building. Something that we're not ashamed of, where it's unabated. It's what our kids need and our families need. So last January, when ICE raids are happening, I brought in 2 or 3 immigration lawyers, right, to talk to families about what can happen, what can't happen, what rights are, what they can't do. Obviously, we have food. That's a great attractive piece, but we have more families that come to those meetings the first Wednesday of every month than I get at my PTO and our school governance council, because they're hungry. The families and kids are hungry for resources, and they're hungry for support. And as building leaders, we have to meet families where they are. And if they can't get to the resources, it's our job to bring the resources to them. So like James said, it will be difficult to get a story. I applaud what Sean has done in collaborating with Weber State. That's fantastic. But in terms of what I do at a building-based level, I go get the resource and I bring it into our building.
I just wanted to say, I think like as a reporter, what I'm hearing from you all is like the importance of reporters building relationships with principals, telling the good stories like about the excellent teachers and the cool innovative programming, so that you then have a relationship and a door that's already open to try to collaborate on ways to center student voices in difficult stories. Because you're not gonna be able to call up a school and say like, hey, I need to talk to these people today. Like, that's not the kind of story we're dealing with here. And I think it just requires us to really build deep relationships with school leaders the same way they're building deep relationships with families, and that just takes time.
Yeah, I think Aubrey, to your point, NASSP, National Association of Secondary School Principals, is just another vehicle to just really support that principal's voice and that access and those relationships. So even as an organization, when you or if you do not have that kind of relationship with a school, reaching out to a national organization, a national association such as that one, can really support identifying or connecting with principals. So just thinking about some different ways to do that work.
We just have a couple more questions, and so hopefully we can get to both. But the first is from an anonymous attendee. They ask, have you all seen a decrease or a stagnation in funding, local and/or state funding since the pandemic? Has this impacted some of the programs you all would provide to students? How are you balancing students' needs and funding constraints?
So in our district, let me back up a little bit. So when COVID ended, we still saw money coming in, all right? And I think it was probably mid last year or so we saw this COVID funding cliff, right? And lots of school districts were talking about it. In our state, very specifically, we felt that impact more so in central office. Our superintendent decided to look at cuts not to schools, or very few to schools. So I think we were very fortunate about that. It did mean that schools were going to be picking up a lot of the pieces that central office used to pick up. So we're feeling it in this kind of different way. But in terms of like this impact around funding, we're seeing that with downsize or just a shrinkage, if you will, in central office. And in our particular district, we have 211 schools. So it's totally different ballgame, right? You know, just one of 40 middle schools. You can probably imagine how big central office has to be. And then when they start talking about shrinking that space, what is it that we need to do? So in my district, we're seeing that more so and how support is provided to school in terms of central office supports, less around, you know, spaces such as books and supplies and staffing. We still have that, and that's been maintained pretty consistently since COVID.
You know, I will say, similarly to James, a lot of our cuts did occur at the central office level. Our superintendent, you know, took a hard line and said, I really don't want to, I'm not going to impact schools and the teachers and the staff that are, you know, student facing, all those things that our kids need. Additionally, in Norwalk, we have something called an SBB, which is site-based budget or school-based budget, where each principal in our district is given a certain dollar amount based on the number of kids in our building. So simply, if we have 10 kids in our building, for example, and each kid is worth $10, we get $100. So I have 650 kids, and I think the average per pupil expenditure in Norwalk may be around 11,500 or 12,000. So whatever that number is, times that 650 is the budget that comes into my building. That pays salaries, benefits, but also leaves quite a few bucks left over to if I wanted to hire another teacher, or if I wanted to purchase a program. So directly at the school building, did it impact? Very, very, very little. Very little.
Just want to hop in there. That's unfortunately all the time we have for today. Sorry if Shauna, you had a comment there, but I want to make sure we're on time with everyone. And sorry if I didn't get to your question, but really happy to see all the conversations we were having here and everything. Real quickly, just want to say thank you so much to our speakers for a fantastic conversation, and Aubrey for moderating. And thanks also to all of the EWA members in attendance. I've dropped a link in the chat for an evaluation form. If you could please fill that out. We take our member feedback seriously and we use it to improve our offerings. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.